Right, let's talk about Dereck, Chisora and Vitali Klitschko and everything that's gone on since. I'm not quite sure where to start on this video, to be honest. I think I'll just talk about the fight and then we'll talk about the aftermath a bit later on. So just to concentrate on the actual fight itself, I think Chisora did a lot better than everybody was expecting, including me. I knew he'd be competitive early, but I didn't think he'd be able to sustain it throughout the fight, which he did, to be honest. He really did push Klitschko harder than anybody since Lennox Lewis. I think that's what they were saying on Box Nation. I think that's true. It's his hardest fight that I can remember for a number of years. Klitschko just couldn't back Chisora up at all. Chisora was coming forward, he was pressuring, he was in Klitschko's face, and it was obvious that Klitschko didn't like it. He wasn't comfortable with it. The body shots really left the mark in more ways than one. You could see the reddening around the side, around the ribs. Chisora just couldn't detonate that big one-punch shot that would have rocked Klitschko. I mean, Chisora's not a one-punch knockout guy anyway, but if it could have landed 2 or 3 big shots in combination, I think he could have really made an impression. I think all the judges gave it 8 rounds, by 8 rounds to Klitschko, which I think is probably about right. Chisora really did come on strong at the end of the fight, though. I mean, he was landing some cracking body punches, and Klitschko was running out of gas. You could see that. He wasn't comfortable with the pace. Klitschko did land some big shots, some big right hand crosses and hooks, and a couple of uppercuts as Chisora sort of ducked his head as he was boring in. But nothing really hurt Chisora to the point of staggering him, or he was certainly never even close to going down at any point, which showed I knew that Chisora could take a shot. He took some big shots from Tyson Fury when he was gassed in that fight. Chisora went into that fight badly out of shape and was just a punch bag really for the second half of the fight, but he never subsided to any of Tyson Fury's big punches, and I knew he could take a big punch, so it wasn't any surprise to me that he saw it through to the end bell. As I said in my prediction, I did think Klitschko would get to him and stop in the mid to late rounds, but obviously that never happened. Chisora deserved to see the final bell, and he did do. And I think in his interview after the fight, he said that the only thing that beat him was experience, and that to some degree I do agree with that. I think Chisora could beat Klitschko, I actually do. Whereas after the Hay and Vladimir Klitschko fight, I didn't want to see that fight ever again, because I don't think Hay could ever beat Vladimir Klitschko. But I think that Chisora can beat Vitali Klitschko, given a couple more fights, which I'll get onto in a minute, and a bit more experience. I think he could get to him and he could wear him down. Klitschko's not getting any younger. He was gassed. I don't care what he says after the fight. He was gassed big time towards the end of the fight, and the body shots left the mark on him for definite. So, yeah, another win for Klitschko, but certainly his hardest fight for a number of years, as I think he admitted afterwards. And if Chisora would have landed a couple of big shots in combination, you never know, he might have rocked him. But without the threat of that one-punch power, I think Klitschko always knew that if he could avoid the big swinging hooks, he could probably sort of get out of there. And he did pick a couple of decent right hands, Klitschko, that landed flush, and a couple of decent jabs as well. Although you could tell that he wasn't happy with the pace and the style of the fight. I think the way it set down the blueprint of how to beat Vitali Klitschko, keep him on the back foot, keep him working non-stop. The body punches was certainly something that surprised me. The amount of hard body punches that Chisora managed to land, and the effect that they had, especially towards the end of the fight. They really did catch up with Klitschko. But yeah, good effort from Chisora. It certainly did himself proud within the 12 rounds. Before and after is another story, as I'll get onto. But a cracking effort, and he can hold his head up high, I think, for his performance. But on to before and after. As I'm sure everybody knows, there was a slap at the weigh-in from Chisora, quite a hard slap actually on Klitschko, and there was rumours of him getting fined. I heard 50 grand and then I heard 30 grand, and that was before the actual shenanigans of the fight, where when Klitschko came into the ring, he obviously had his brother Vladimir Klitschko by his side. Chisora walked up to him just before they did the national anthems and spat water in Vladimir Klitschko's face, which was really out of order. There was pushing and shoving before the names were announced, and then obviously we had the fight, and then that looked as though it was going to be it, but afterwards they sort of shook hands and then it all kicked off again. We had more pushing and shoving, especially with Vladimir. Vladimir Klitschko seemed to get involved, stepped in between Vitali and Dereck Chisora and sort of got himself involved needlessly, in my opinion. He didn't need to be anywhere near that, but so it looked like we were going to get, they were setting up for maybe a Chisora and Vladimir Klitschko fight, but then afterwards we had the press conference. As I'm sure everybody's seen, it's all over YouTube already. It's been on Sky News. It's been everywhere. That Chisora and David Haye had a pretty violent set too. Actually, looking at it, David Haye was there, stood at the back. He was having a quite heated argument with Klitschko's management and Klitschko himself, saying that his management don't want them to make the fight and that he wants to fight. He's ready to fight now. And then Chisora sort of interjected himself into the argument, and it didn't seem as though David Haye really had an argument with Chisora, but Chisora seemed to pick away, and then he got up and sort of confronted David Haye face to face. And David Haye, he was drinking a bottle of beer, and it looked like he threw a punch, but he had the bottle in his hand. So Chisora was obviously saying that David Haye had glassed him, if you like. David Haye then picked up a tripod off a camera and sort of hit Chisora's trainer across the head, and in doing so it actually cut his own trainer Adam Booth as well. And then it looked like Haye was sort of forced out of the building and Chisora was forced out the other side. It was really quite unnecessary and quite sort of unseemly like actions really, but from both of them. I don't think you can blame any one over the other. I think it was just terrible for the sport of boxing and really sort of terrible for both guys, really. I wouldn't be surprised to see the licences revoked for an amount of time. Or I know that Chisora has actually been arrested at Munich airport as he was about to fly home. He got arrested because he actually threatened to shoot David Haye. So he's got arrested for that. I don't know what the outcome of that will be. I think there's news breaking all the time on it, but I expect him to be released and he'll fly home eventually. But yeah, it doesn't look good for either fighter really. So I don't know where they're going to go with it. They could do Chisora versus Haye, I guess. It would sell, obviously, after what happened in the press conference. It would sell big numbers, especially in the UK. It looked like they were going to go with, I would have predicted, with Chisora would probably challenge Vladimir Klitschko and David Haye would come back and fight Vitali. But I don't know, you could do that, or you could, obviously, as I say, you could do the Chisora and Haye fight, and if Haye wins, then he fights Vitali Klitschko after that. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, but as I say, I don't think either of them will be fighting for a while, both Chisora or Haye. It wouldn't surprise me if they had their boxing licence revoked and by the British Board of Control, and so at least for a certain amount of time. Because if you've not seen it, go and check it out from the press conference on YouTube. It was pretty violent stuff, and Haye obviously had been drinking. I don't know quite the extent, but I don't think you can blame either guy over the other. I think it was just totally unnecessary, and Chisora's obviously got a major problem with David Haye. But I would certainly pay to see Haye versus Chisora. I think that'd be a good fight. The build-up would be worth keeping an eye on in itself. So I think that was probably what I would do. I think they've got to make that fight. That fight needs to happen now after what's happened at the press conference. I think Haye versus Chisora needs to happen. And then Haye, who I think would win that fight quite comfortably actually, would then go on to fight probably Vitali Klitschko down the line. So yeah, drop your comments below, let me know what you think of it. Quite astonishing really, but we'll see where they go from here. Cheers.